Hi. If you're on a tight budget but you want to improve the quality and persistence of your homebrews, or you are sharing the hobby with friends but you're lacking one central place to share all assets of your brewery, or you are currently using a device that has 2 buttons only and it takes half the brew day to get all meshing steps set, or you simply want to focus on the more important stuff during a brew day, such as tasting new craft beer to get inspired, then this video might be for you. I'm Bernard and I'm going to show you how to build a web or app-based brewing control for just 25 bucks that solves all of the aforementioned problems. You can invite friends to your brewery and share recipes, brewing logs, and controlled equipment. You can control your fermentation or meshing steps automatically, or even both if you set up 2 devices. Everything you need to follow along is going to be in the description below, such as the free software we are going to put on the device or the software tools we are going to need, as well as the hardware you are going to need. Sounds good? Let's get started. For this project, we will need a couple of tools. The first one is a typical Phillips screwdriver, the world's most versatile tool, the tablespoon, a soldering iron, some solder, of course this amount is massively overkill, something to cut a cable into 2 pieces, and something that allows us to de-isolate the endings of the cable. Material-wise, we need a Sonoff TH16 smart device, that is the core of our build. A 4x1 pin header to connect our rainbow cable. The rainbow cable with 4 connections in total and female ends on both sides. And a device that allows us to connect our PC to the Sonoff TH16 and flash the alternate firmware. You will also need a DS18B20 temperature sensor from Sonoff, but this one can be easily plugged in after the build. The setup can be broken down into 3 topics. First, preparing your Sonoff TH16. Second, flashing the BierBot Bricks software onto your device. Third, connecting your device to your BierBot Bricks brewery. Before we continue, the following steps should only be performed by experts since we are working with high voltages and there's a risk of electrocution. Step 1. The first thing we will need to do is to disassemble the Sonoff TH16 since we need access to some of the electrical components inside. First, remove the screw in the front. Then, use a tablespoon to disassemble the housing. The easiest thing is to start at the U-shaped hole on the back of the device, put a tablespoon in, and then twist it to pop the housing open. And then just make your way around the housing to crack it open step by step. And it's actually a lot easier when you're not filming. Now remove the upper side of the housing and you'll be presented with the PCB. Since we also need access to the lower side of the PCB, we will need to unscrew the 4 Phillips screws located on the PCB. Now place the pin header on top of the PCB. We only need the pinholes from VCC to GND, and we don't need the pinhole saying EXP-LOG. Use something to clamp it in place. Make sure that it's aligned properly and just solder it. Start with the 2 pins on the outside and work yourself to the middle. Once that is done, we can screw the PCB back to the lower part of the housing. Be careful that the pin header has to be on the side of the U-shaped hole. Now connect the pin header we just soldered onto the PCB to the rainbow cable. I recommend taking a picture of the mapping from the pin header names to the color of the respective rainbow cable for future reference. Now route the rainbow cable through the opening of the housing and back to the front. I find that the easiest way to do so is by routing the cable on the very left or right, depending on your reference. The housing should just snap into place and we're done with part 1. Now grab the extension cord. It's important that you look for the amperage. In this case it says 16 amps, which is in Germany sufficient to power cooking equipment of up to 3.5 kilowatts, which is the maximum that is coming out of the wall sockets, which is good for our use case. I like to simply use the middle of the cable to cut it. Depending on your way of installment, it makes sense to shorten the cable or cut at a specific other location than just the middle. Now de-isolate both cable endings. I like to solder the endings of my cables to be easier to insert into the terminals of the Sonoff TH16. In Germany we have NL and the mass symbol. The mass symbol is depicted with a Greek letter looking like an epsilon to me on the PCB. L and N stay the same. The mapping is as follows. N is going to the blue cable, L is going to the brown cable, and green is going to the epsilon looking like label. While for the blue cable, any port labeled N works, and for the yellow-green cable, any port labeled with epsilon works, brown is a little bit more difficult. The brown cable coming from the plug draining power from your wall must be connected with L in. The brown cable going to the socket of your extension cable, where your heating or cooling is plugged in, must go to L out. We will start with the cable coming from our plug. So N is blue. L is brown, and that goes to the input port. And green goes to the port depicted by epsilon. Next up is the cable with the socket. Same thing. N goes to the blue cable. Brown goes in this case to the output label, and green goes to the one depicted with the epsilon or the mass. The last step is simply to close the housing again. The next step is to connect the rainbow cables to your serial converter. To do that, you need to reference the picture you took earlier with your camera. The easiest one to connect are VCC and ground. In my case, blue was ground. That goes to the very top of my serial converter. And orange was VCC, which is the next pin on my serial converter. Be careful that there is one pin which is skipped. And we're done with preparing. So on to step 2, flashing the software. For flashing your device, it's important to put the Sonoff TH16 into flash mode. We do that by holding down the button on the Sonoff TH16 and then while the button is pressed, connecting power. So pushing the button, holding the button, connecting the power. And if you release the button now, your Sonoff TH16 is ready to be flashed. The Windows connection sound should come up. Open your workspace, right-click on this PC, go to Properties, and go to the Device Manager. If your COM port is correctly recognized, it should look like this, saying USB serial port, something like COM3 for example. Note the number, in this case it's a 3, it's gonna be important later on. If you should have trouble that your PC does not recognize your USB serial port, installing the drivers might help. You can find the drivers that probably will work for you under the developer setup or in a future version, maybe somewhere else, but somewhere on the README. But for now, we will follow the steps up here. So we need the latest release. There is a section on the right saying latest releases. There may be more up-to-date ones. Simply pick the most up-to-date one. And we only need the binary from the firmware. Gonna download this. And to flash the binary onto your Sonoff TH16 and ultimately turn it into a BierBot Brick, we will need the Node MCU flasher. That's a handy little tool for flashing binaries onto ESP8266 chips. I'm on Windows 64-bit, so I'll just download the executable located here. Then head over to your downloads folder. Since we will need that later, we're going to copy the binary name into our clipboard. We can do that by right-clicking and selecting rename or simply hitting F2. Control A, Control C for copy, and now it's in our clipboard. Next step is to open the ESP8266 flashing tool. Be sure to select the right COM port. In my case, it's COM port number 3. Head over to the config tab and paste the name of the binary in here by doing Ctrl V. If your file is recognized, the text input should still be background colored green. Then go back to the operation tab and hit flash. If your access point MAC is showing up, you know that everything worked okay so far. The ESP flashing tool will now flash your device. Once the flashing is done, you should see a green check mark on the lower left side. You can now close the flashing tool and proceed to the last step, connecting your BierBot Brick to your brewery. Head over to bricks.bierbot.com, select Bricks in the brewery section of the menu on the left. Then click on the blue Add Brick button on the top right corner. It will show you an API key you need to copy into your clipboard. You can either use your keyboard to copy it or just click the copy button on the right side. Now, disconnect the power from your BierBot Brick and reconnect the power of your BierBot Brick. The USB port is sufficient in this case. The BierBot Brick is now creating an access point we can use to configure. Go to the list of Wi-Fis that are available to your device. This can be any device, either your PC, your Mac, your iPhone, or your Android device, and connect to the BierBot Brick 101 access point. It will automatically redirect you to a access point page where you can configure your BierBot Brick. Simply hit Configure Wi-Fi. It will then scan for the networks around you. Enter your Wi-Fi password and paste the API key we just copied into our clipboard. Hit Save. The BierBot Brick now tries to connect to your home network. Once that succeeds, it will show up in your BierBot Bricks account. Before you can actually use it, you can simply activate it or change its name. And to finally assign your BierBot Brick to a specific piece of equipment, head over to Equipment. We're going to create a new device. In this case, we will select a mesh tun. And now you can assign, for example, the relay of our BierBot Brick by simply dragging and dropping it onto the heating. Same goes for the temperature sensor that we just assigned to our mesh tun by drag and dropping. After you're done, simply hit Save. And you're good to go. Simply connect your heating or cooling equipment to the socket of your brick. Connect your brick to the wall. Connect your temperature sensor to the brick. And install your temperature sensor in your equipment, for example, in your mesh tun. And you have the ability to turn water into beer. There are a bunch of cool features we didn't even cover in this video. If you have any questions or feature requests, please use the comment section below, shoot us an email, or use any of the social media platforms. Also, if you found this video helpful, a like would be very much appreciated. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one. Gut Sud, peace.